Hey everyone, it's Tobias Mann, Systems Editor at The Register, and today I'm joined by Digital Realty's Chief Technology Officer, Chris Sharp, to discuss how the AI boom is changing the data center landscape. To get started, let's kick off with one of the hotter topics that we've come across over the last couple weeks, or rather months at this point. AI accelerators are hungry little beasts that need lots and lots of power, and they have to go into data centers, and it's brought up a lot of challenges. So, Chris, I want to ask you, are data centers really at risk of running out of power, or are these concerns overblown?
Thank you, Tobias. Happy to be here. Very relevant topic today, as you already alluded to, but a couple elements to that. Yeah, it depends on the horizon of time that we're thinking about, but I'll tell you, one of the things that we've done in my career, and particularly at Digital, is master planning, right? Where working with a utility, working with the operator in the local municipalities to kind of plan a longer term campus build is absolutely paramount. And so I tell you, that's why we've been able to achieve, over a gigawatt in one of the critical markets on Earth, be it Ashburn, Virginia, with another gigawatt of runway in that particular market. But yeah, no, definitely the demand is increasing exponentially for a lot of the generative AI accelerators. And depending upon that horizon, how far you look out, if depending upon the numbers that you kind of dig into, that the overall industry could double in 5 years, we will run out of power. And that's something that we're constantly looking at, alternative power sources like SMR, enhanced geothermals, just, different ways to deliver power to the grid, be it even the 1.4 gig of solar and wind that we've already, invested in and brought to the overall grid, just to ensure that our customers have an efficient, sustainable way to deliver their requirements.
Mhm. So tell me, so power is clearly an issue, but is it the biggest one that data centers are currently grappling with, or is it something else like cooling or planning in general?
Yeah, great topic, right? In the most simplistic sense, yes, power, without power, none of it works. But as you alluded to, digging into the details is absolutely paramount. And, not only having the power available, if you can't support the cooling requirements and the power density requirements associated with these devices, it definitely can end up in a suboptimal design. And in some cases, you won't even be able to deploy it. But yeah, the cooling is something that we always look at, and the advancements of cooling, right? Where bringing liquid into the environment is absolutely at the forefront now. Uh, just at the highest level, liquid is denser, 800 times denser than air. So you can do a lot more with that. Bringing that to the chip is even more efficient. So we're pretty excited about the PUE efficiencies that can be achieved with that design. But then capacity blocks is another element, right? It's a different way to think about the power, not just speaking from a data center operator, but some of our customers. So our customers are like, what's the largest GPU core that I can establish? So really unpacking that and understanding what they're trying to do is they want as many of these accelerators into a single fabric or a single networked environment. And that requires a different type of design and architecture to achieve that. And so I think, I've often alluded to this where you can have 5 times the cabling, if not more, for a generative AI build. So like one of the things we look at, and you can see it right when you see some of our designs supporting generative AI, is you have 5 to 6 times the cable trays. And so you
Right,
can
right.
see,
That's a lot to manage.
oh,
But
it is. It is. And I mean, I always like, I'm a technologist at heart, but just looking at the simple fit out and the running of the cables and just some of the pre-manufactured cables, it truly is becoming art, because you can have a million plus cables inside of the 4 walls of a data center now, just internetworking all of these accelerators.
I can't imagine trying to track down what cable is broken or what transceiver isn't working properly in an environment like that. I know that they're working very hard to build in a lot of new diagnostic capabilities and kind of fabric mapping to support all of that. But I think something our audience would really enjoy or would be curious to know is, a lot of numbers get thrown around the densities of these deployments. And, we have kind of standardized building blocks for some of them. NVIDIA has DGX, where you have right around 40 and soon 60 kilowatt racks. But, in your experience, what's the densest rack you've actually come across?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll kind of go a little bit core and then go to the further extent, which is a little bit folklore. One of the things we constantly see it's dependent upon the touch point that we're really solving for. So we do a lot of work with all the hyperscalers. That has a more uniform density level where you can see the 60, 70 kilowatts a rack for generative AI coming into play. Being able to bring liquid to the chip can get us up to 150, which has a lot of headroom. I think that's another element that we think about, not about the generation today, but because the rhythm of new chips coming to market is about 12 months. So, the data center will operate longer than that 12 months. So aligning with that future kind of requirement is another key element that we constantly look at. The second touch point is private AI. So these are the enterprises bringing their own capabilities to market. That really manifests itself with hotspots. So that is, again, we can solve with 70 kilowatt racks. You can use rear door heat exchangers for a lot of that environment. But then as you get into the 150s, you have to do DLC. But we're seeing pockets of that show up. But normally there's a lot of other infrastructure that's a lot less dense. But that's kind of like where we're seeing the world evolve to. I mean, a lot of the traditional core infrastructure we have, because it's unique to digital, 2.5 gigawatts under management today, customers are ideating that all the time. So they're bringing in the algorithm to do analytics against their data that exists there. So that's where we've done a lot of retrofit and those capabilities. But we're pretty excited about that. I think the average densities are, increasing 15 kilowatts.
Right. A lot of this is changing very quickly now. And, I remember talking to folks about 2 years ago when it was just like kind of the idea of more than 12 kilowatts per rack in a colocation facility was kind of crazy. That was high for anything but the craziest HPC kind of workload. Bringing in somebody in kind of pharmaceuticals or chemical development who's doing HPC, or having to do fluid dynamics calculations, and those were relatively compact systems, and so you could kind of work around it. Now, when you're talking about deploying 10,000 GPUs in order to do training with, that's a completely other kind of world in terms of being able to support that.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right, it is accelerating and it's picking up in speed. And, HPC, the broader kind of market, we've been watching it for some time now. But that's why I always talk about the form factor of, be it hyperscaler or be it private AI. They're different form factors of what shows up in the data center. And you have to have a design that's modular to effectively align to that. Because, speaking from, a publicly traded company, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we align with the customer, not ahead, not behind, essentially allowing ourselves to look at the pipeline. Like we've won 60 plus AI deals since the beginning of the year.
You have a lot to juggle, because the nature of your business is such that if you build too much too quickly, it's no longer profitable. And if you don't build quickly enough, your competitors win share. And so it's kind of this balancing act of how do you make money hosting other people's metal? And so it's one of those really tricky things to juggle. And so I want to ask you, what is it like doing that in an environment where a lot of people are worried that this is going to become another .com bubble? What do data centers need to grow and to support this AI growth if, let's say, this isn't another bubble and this keeps going the way that it is?
Yeah, just to tie those two elements together, and the last question is relevance, right? It's not only relevance of our designs and being able to meet the customer requirements, but it's also the relevance of what's being deployed. And so I often talk about ecosystems, and we work within, with the customer to understand what are they trying to architect and who are the other customers that they're going to bet their business on and try to leverage. And so that's where we protect ourselves from the bubble kind of scenario that you're alluding to, where we're not chasing big training farms in the middle of nowhere where you're monetizing a transaction. We're really working at what we feel, in just the highest sense, generative AI has training and inference. We really focus on inference, which is going to be a larger demand cycle because that's where customers interact with generative AI. But that inference and the internetworking and the proximity that's becoming into focus around being close to data, close to end consumers, that's how you avoid that kind of bubble scenario you're alluding to.
Right, because there's a lot of companies that have popped up over the last couple of years that are bringing in a lot of debt on the back of GPU financing, and that's fine. Well, the GPUs are worth something, but if the demand goes away, it's a dicey situation to be in.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it as well, where quite frankly, you learn a lot from these multi-tenant GPU as a service providers because they're going to have the broadest mix of different LLMs, be it training, be it inference. They'll understand the internetworking, the throughput, the latency requirements of that. You can learn a lot from it. And also, to your last part, I don't know, like I really think that you're seeing some of these state-of-the-art chipsets coming in for training, and they have a longer tail to be able to be utilized for inference. And that's where we constantly watch not only the workload, but also the infrastructure coming into play. But because of the material expense with a lot of this infrastructure, we think there will be a decent tail to being relevant and being utilized going forward.
Okay, so the $1 million question, or $1 trillion question maybe, is, looking out 5-10 years into the future, what are data centers going to look like? Are they going to look largely the same as they do today, do you think, or do you think they're going to change dramatically? I've heard so much talk about things like data centers becoming electrical utilities or electrical co-ops that during periods of low computational demand can feed electricity back into the greater grid and even out challenges with renewable energy. Say the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, you can even some of that out. I've also heard more funner examples given, like using AI, training AI and using the heat generated from doing that to heat greenhouses and grow tomatoes. I mean, at supercomputing, there was an example of that. And I think they figured out that training GPT-3, you could grow about 1 million tomatoes with the heat from that. So there's all of this speculation in terms of what data centers are going to look like and how they're going to change as a result of these trends. What's your take?
No, I love it. And I agree with you. There's a lot of noise out there, which is why I always love chatting with yourself and the broader community. The data center of the future, and you gave like the 5 to 10 year kind of horizon. So thinking through and unpacking a bit of that, I alluded to some folklore earlier about rack density. Now there's some folklore that 2 megawatts, 4 racks. That's crazy, right? Like that's some high end math that we have to figure out thermal displacement and things like that. But that could be in that horizon where you see that type of densification. The data center does have to change to support that kind of tip of the spear. I will also completely agree with you in that, inside of Ireland, we actually do feed a bit of resiliency back to the grid, which has been able to allow us to shave some of the peak utilization there and be a better steward of the utility grid for the broader community. I think,
talk about one of the most challenging markets in the world for data center power delivery.
100%, couldn't agree more. And then the heat, I was just in Stockholm and Copenhagen. We're able to funnel a lot of that excess heat to heat homes and be able to heat businesses there. And again, further utilize the effectiveness of the community out of that data center and the benefits that data center can deliver. And I think, the last element is power, right? And I think at a 10-year horizon, I've spoke about this publicly and we are still looking and doing a lot of due diligence, but small modular reactors. Right, because of the demand and being able to place SMRs in proximity to data centers and also fortified the grid, right, where you can balance, the broader demand in a more
assuming anybody can actually build one that's financially viable, of course, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna go on record. I think in the next year we will see a lot coming online with the economics being fully transparent, and I have high hopes just because it's a requirement that of the overall industry that we need that type of power to come into the grid. But very exciting times. But I could see a future where you are going to have, maybe it's not operated by the data center operators ourselves, but you will have SMRs placed in strategic locations within the grid to fulfill that demand.
Co-located. Well, I'm going to a year. That's a bold expectation. I'm going to hold you to it and circle back around that time and see where we stand. But Chris, I really want to thank you again for coming on and chatting with us about this important topic. And for the broader audience, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much, Tobias.